Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. Today we've got 3 all-new Dogman stories, each of them sent in by one of you and adapted by Peter Bernard into YouTube language. You see, there are some words we're not supposed to use here, so it's all gotta be rephrased into advertiser-friendly kind of storytelling. Hopefully you know what I mean. Otherwise, I don't know what to tell you. Before we get started with our 3 never-before-heard stories, allow me to thank today's executive producer, Timothy S., the Trapper. Thank you, Trapper. We couldn't do it without you. If you would like to become a Scary Stories executive producer like Trapper, just go to peterbernard.com and join our very affordable paid subscribers club. Give us 24 hours to email you back, and then you get instant access to over 7 hours of uncensored scary stories too wild to ever run on this channel, and a new secret uncensored story each Sunday. All of that at peterbernard.com. Now, let's get started with our first story of the day. It's about a guy who grew up expecting to see the Dogman, but he never did. When he stopped expecting it, though, that's when it finally happened. And we call that story The Dogman, near Whitehall, New York. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I grew up in Wisconsin, home of the Wisconsin Werewolf and the Beast of Bray Road. I attended college at Oakland University, which is in Michigan, home of many other Dogman sightings. But it wasn't until I moved near a community known for protecting their local Sasquatch species that I finally laid eyes on a real, actual Dogman. All of my life, since I was a kid, I had always wanted to see a cryptid, mainly Bigfoot. As I grew older, I learned that animals don't always behave in a friendly way like your pet dog, and I stopped wishing so fervently to get to come face to face with Bigfoot in person. Nevertheless, I still really wanted to see one deep down. Being from the area of the Beast of Bray Road, I would say that Dogman and Bigfoot were about equally interesting to me, and I was just as curious about either. As you grow up, you start to concern yourself more with bill payments than with dreams, and my dreams of meeting Bigfoot or Dogman got lost in one of my moves. Very little of that childhood part of me seemed to even exist any longer. Bigfoot and Dogman weren't real, and I was late on the rent. Thinking about monsters became a childish thing to do. Life punished me if I dwelt on that subject. When I ignored cryptids, I got my jobs done, I got my bills paid, and I even got a girlfriend after a while. The problem was, that girlfriend, she grew up in Whitehall and she obsessed over Bigfoot. She's never seen one, but she wants to, and she talks about Bigfoot to me at least once per day. She's great for me, but I have an issue of becoming addicted to cryptids, so I mostly limit my participation in her discussions. Whitehall made it a crime to harm a Bigfoot. That's how popular the creature is around here. Where we live is technically just outside the Bigfoot protected area, but we're close enough to feel the spirit of that in our day-to-day lives. My girlfriend remains convinced that Sasquatch, or at least one of the forms of Sasquatch, will be recognized by science publicly during our lifetime. Personally, I think they'll allow it to become extinct before admitting it was real for various reasons, concerning the government and industry that I'd rather not get into here. However, my girlfriend is different from me. She is the eternal optimist. Now, in our town, the residential area and the part zoned for stores are separated by some distance. It's 5 minutes away by car, but on most nights when the weather isn't too bad, I like to walk to get items I'm craving for that evening. There are 2 ways to go. One is to walk past the high school and the town's administrative buildings to get to where the stores are, and the other is to take a shortcut through a patch of woods between some private homes. On this one very dark night, I chose the patch of woods. Now, once you are inside those trees, you are not going to see your hand in front of your face. If you keep your eyes on your goal, which was the street lit with street lamps on the far end of the forested patch, then you'd usually be fine. As I attempted to focus my eyes on the light at the end of that figurative tunnel on that night, however, I saw that someone was blocking my path at the far end. Alarm bells rang off inside me and adrenaline flowed as I became instantly scared and slipped into fight or flight mode. I thought I was about to be mugged and I froze up. The figure at the far end didn't move, and my senses heightened as I wondered if he had any partners hidden in the darkness closer to me than he was. My hearing and my vision became the focus of my concentration. I wanted to hear any sound happening in that small patch of woods. I wanted to see better in that darkness. The figure on the far end adopted a different pose, as though he were both defending and preparing to attack simultaneously. As he did so, he both moved forward and back, and he allowed more of his face and body to be illuminated by the street lamps. This was not a mugger. This was some kind of feral cryptid. It was not clothed, and it was not human. It was fur-covered. It had wolf ears and a long snout like a canine. Not like a bear, not like an ape, not like some kind of big cat. This had a face and a snout like a dog, but up on top of a muscle-laden, hairy body that resembled a primate's in most ways. The legs were different. They were like a cat or dog's hind legs, yet sort of reformatted to support the entire weight of the creature on the hind limbs as it stood there upright and on guard from my attack. I was terrified, and I knew I had better get out of there, but at the same time, I was fully aware that I had finally achieved my childhood dream of getting to see a real cryptid with my own eyes. That didn't mean I wasn't terrified, but at the same moment, it was so beyond exhilarating that I can't even begin to explain it to you. Even as it was there, even as I wondered if it would charge me and end my days, I felt so fully alive, so aware of and in tune with my purpose. I knew that either I was going to be punished badly for this indulgence by the creature, or else I was going to get away with it and live to tell the tale. I was living in a moment that was guaranteed to never be forgotten by me, whether I lived another 10 decades or another 10 seconds. I felt weirdly guilty as I stood there for how intensely joyful I really felt inside. Yes, it all might end in a second and I should be horrified, but in the meantime, I was living out my dream, and it felt so good that I remembered dreams really actually do matter. And when the dogman charged me, I remembered that life mattered to me even more. I ran the entire way home, and I never looked behind. He probably just scared me off with a bluff charge, but I'll never know, because I was too chicken and too terrified to look behind me even once. When I got back, I told my girlfriend what had happened, and she tried to convince me it was a Bigfoot I had seen. If that was a Bigfoot, then it was a Bigfoot with a dog head. We hopped in the car to drive to the store, and my girlfriend came with me because She wanted to keep her eye out for Bigfoot along the way. We had to take the path by the high school, though, since you can't drive through that patch of woods, so we did not see anything out of the ordinary. After I kept insisting for weeks afterward that it was a dogman and not a Bigfoot, my girlfriend eventually adopted a new theory. She wonders if the dogman might be some kind of spirit. In other words, she thinks it might be a sort of a ghost that manifests as a real animal. She has this theory because it would explain how I came from dogman territory in Michigan and Wisconsin and moved into Bigfoot territory in Whitehall, and yet, somehow, I seem to have brought the dogman with me. I don't really bother trying to make up theories to explain the inexplicable things that happen in life. I just like to open my mind to them and experience them and leave the judgments for the higher beings. Me? I'm just a regular person, working hard, paying my bills, and once, just once, getting to experience the utter awe and mystery of the Dogman near Whitehall, New York.
I'd like to take a moment to say that if you have a scary story you'd like to tell us here, you can write Peter at peterbernard.com, or you can call our new Scary Stories hotline number and leave it to us in the form of a voicemail message. It's easy to remember. 804-LESCARY. That's 804 LESCARY, or 804-537-2279.
Super Bright-Eyed Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story that happened to my family only a little while ago. We live in a nice suburb of a large northeastern city. My wife and I own our own home, which we share with our son, who sleeps upstairs, and our big old Doberman girl, Casey, who sleeps in her doghouse that I built for her. At least in those days she used to. My wife and I sleep on the ground floor of the house, with windows looking out on Casey's doghouse and the backyard surrounded in trees. One night, I woke up when I heard a crazy amount of barking out back coming from Casey. She would bark at night sometimes, but usually the barking would scare the squirrel or raccoon or whatever it was away, and I could get back to sleep then. In this case, though, the more she barked, the more she continued to bark. It just seemed like it would never end. Both my wife and I were awake, and she asked me if I could get up and see what the fuss was. I was staring out the window trying to see what Casey was barking about. In the middle of the yard, I saw a figure with two bright amber lights up on top where the eyes should be. I took it to be wearing a helmet like people do in caves, with a bright light up on top. Only instead of one white bright light, this one had two golden colored lights, twice as bright as the one white one would have been. I woke my wife up. Let's call her Melba, which is an in-joke between us and not her real name. I asked her to come see what I was seeing. The figure was light-colored and possibly a few different shades of gray. I asked my wife why it was wearing high heels. She said it wasn't. It had backward bent legs like a devil. She told me it was the Goat Man, and that got me kind of a little freaked out. I looked back out the window, and that thing kept walking, one slow bipedal step after another, toward our poor Casey, who was chained up and unable to get at the creature or get away. She was barking and snarling and trying to get loose to fight, but the upright walking creature just stood perfectly straight up and walked slowly toward her and toward the house. Eventually, the figure moved close enough that we could make out that it looked far more like a dog than like a goat. We had thought we saw goat horns on top of its head, but those were in fact tall, wolf-like ears standing straight up. The legs did not end in hooves as with a goat. They ended in claws, as with a dog or a cat. It was not a goat man. It was a dog man, and it was headed toward our family dog, Casey. The way the figure was advancing reminded me of a video I had seen of 4-legged robots being created by our own military. This one was bipedal, but still oddly reminded me of that. Couple this gut feeling with the incredibly bright, blinding headlights up on top, and I was not sure this was a real animal. I felt possibly it could be some sort of very advanced robotic device, either remotely controlled or operating using artificial intelligence. As I was thinking these thoughts, the figure bared its teeth toward our dog and began growling and snarling back at her. This had gone far enough. I needed to do something to protect Casey. I ran around the house, looking for an idea that might work. How I wished I had some high-powered defense at that point. I could just fire it over the creature's head and hope it ran off. If it didn't, I would know what to do next. But my wife won't allow me to have anything in the house that would protect us. It's like she loves burglars more than she loves her own family. I was at my wit's end, and considering calling the police to protect my dog, when there came a series of small, but very loud, explosions out of the window. When I looked out, I realized there were firecrackers going off in the air and on the ground in the yard. Casey had run back inside her doghouse, and the dogman figure had dropped to all fours, turned tail, and run back into the woods. As slowly and methodically as it had progressed on 2 legs, that's how lightning fast it ran in retreat when those firecrackers went off. I turned to my wife and suggested, "You take Chester, I'll take Casey." Chester, in case you haven't guessed, is our son, who is not allowed to have firecrackers. Obviously he did have them though, and that may have saved our dog's life. I didn't want to punish him for it, but I knew Melba would. I went out to bring poor Casey inside. That dog was completely shaken up, and she didn't really get to sleep the rest of the night, barking periodically to wake us up every hour or so until dawn. We had to get used to it though. It was clearly not safe to leave the dog outside at night. Either that glowing-eyed dogman was a large apex predator, or else it was some kind of futuristic robot device meant to impersonate an apex predator. Either way, it would be unfair to ask Casey to deal with something like that on her own. Yes, Dobermans are good fighters, but I'd say a real-life dogman, whatever a real-life dogman actually turns out to be, that's just a wee bit above our Casey's pay grade. So, that's the story of what I hope will be our only ever encounter with the super bright-eyed Dogman. Dogman gave my horse Lycanthropy. Dear Scary Stories NYC, we had a bad encounter with a dogman that we suspect may have actually been a shape-shifting lycanthrope. Listen, and I'll tell you why. One night, my wife and I both awoke to hear our horse Starburst whinnying loudly in distress. We ran out to the stables, and she was being harassed by a large thing that at first I took to be some kind of an ape. I grabbed my defensive weapon and aimed. In case it was a man, I shouted a warning telling him to stop immediately or face the consequences. When that thing heard me, it turned around, and I could see this was no guy in a monkey suit. It had a head, like a hyena. That was my first thought. This is an African hyena. I took aim, and I fired. But the thing moved as I did so, and it only seemed to get grazed as it performed the most over-the-top athletic move I've ever seen performed in that stable. It leaped up over the horse and past it, making it out the back door and into the woods in just a few bounding steps. Somehow, the back door had been broken into by the thing, and Starburst had gotten scratched in the tumult. My wife dressed her wounds as I worked to secure both the front and back doors of the stable to withstand another attack and make it through the night. The next day, Starburst was still shaken up, but her wounds were healing nicely, and we were hopeful she was going to be fine. I went into town and got better doors for the stable, hooked to an alarm system that would ring in the house if it got broken into. As far as I was concerned, the problem had been dealt with and was now in our past. Then came the next full moon. We woke up to sounds that were all too familiar. It sounded just like the night when the Dogman had broken into the stable. Running out there, we found Starburst entirely alone, but not being harassed by anyone or anything. She herself was not herself. She seemed to have gone feral and wild, trying to break out of her stable by herself. It was a terrifying night as we tried to calm her, unsure of what had happened to her. By dawn, she was herself again, but my wife and I were worn out. We discovered that this was to be the new pattern each month during the full moon. Starburst would lose control and seem to become this kind of prehistoric and wild version of her normal self. By a half a year later, we were both certain that the thing which had broken into the stables had to have been a werewolf. The scratches it inflicted must have made our horse a lycanthrope as well. I know of no other logical explanation, although you're certainly welcome to disagree with me. Eventually, Starburst had a fit so bad that she broke her leg, and we had to put her down. I never cried so much over a horse in my life. She should still be with us today. She should still be a happy horse. But she's gone. And that's all because Dogman gave my horse lycanthropy. Hey, it's me, Henry Lee Dogman, here to thank those of you who support all of us here at Scary Stories NYC. It really helps us if you click like, and if you forward our videos or leave cool comments. If you can, it helps us even more when you let us share our 25-episode and growing collection of uncensored, scary Dogman stories with you by becoming a paid subscriber at peterbernard.com. That's right, join our monthly club and get 25 stories right off the bat, each of them wilder than what we're allowed to tell you on this channel. Then, each Sunday, get another new scary story, usually a Dogman story, but always uncensored and secret, available nowhere else on the planet. Please consider joining us today at peterbernard.com and keep the scary stories coming. Thanks, everyone.
If you enjoyed this, please click like or consider subscribing. Remember to click the bell icon or you won't get notifications. If you want to listen to Bigfoot's secret uncensored story each Sunday, just go to peterbernard.com and become a paid subscriber. See you tomorrow. Same dog time, same dog channel.
Come back for more scary stories.